Humour or overstep. How this season redefined comfort zones in the jungle. The moment people started reacting strongly to that unexpected kiss, describing how Dec looked genuinely stunned and how the entire interaction shifted the energy of the scene, it opened a wider discussion about spontaneity versus boundaries on television. And I think this situation is a perfect example of how humour can sometimes blur into discomfort, so feel free to share in the comments where you personally draw that line. What struck me most was how one viewer said that the reaction would have been completely different if an older man had done the same gesture toward a younger woman, which reveals how social expectations heavily influence public judgment, and this topic deserves deeper analysis because it shows how fairness, respect, and context shape the way we interpret seemingly funny moments. I found it fascinating how something that lasted only a second created such intense debate, proving that audiences are extremely sensitive to body language and unplanned contact. And this sensitivity reflects a cultural shift where viewers expect clear emotional safety even in light-hearted shows, which makes me wonder how you perceived that scene and whether it changed your view of the interaction. Ruby's behavior, which some viewers described as chaotic or attention-seeking, while others found it playful and harmless, highlights how subjective humor is, and the diverse reactions show how one personality can split an audience into groups that interpret spontaneity either as entertaining unpredictability or intrusive overstepping. Another strong reaction came from people saying Ruby wrecked the table, and even if the comment was light-hearted, it reveals how viewers often interpret exaggerated gestures as symbolic of deeper personality traits, which demonstrates how audiences blend physical action with psychological inference. A different user called Ant and Dec annoying and attention-seeking, which adds another layer, showing that even presenters can become part of the discussion about boundaries, especially when their reactions influence how a surprising moment lands emotionally, raising the question of whether humor from authority figures feels different than humor from contestants. There was also a comment describing how someone didn't have time to take his words back before she went for it, which illustrates how spontaneity can escalate faster than expected, and this rapid shift often leaves audiences unsure whether to laugh or cringe, making the scene a perfect psychological case study for analyzing mixed emotional signals. When people debated whether Ruby is actually funny or simply over the top, it revealed a deeper truth. Comedy in group settings depends on resonance, not volume, meaning that one person's humor can either bond or divide, depending on how the rest of the environment responds, and this tension is essential to understanding why certain scenes stirred such layered reactions. One viewer pointed out that the kiss looked like a kiss off granny, which changes the emotional framing entirely, because describing it in a familial, humorous way softens the discomfort, showing how language influences perception more than the actual gesture itself, and I find this framing shift extremely interesting to analyze. Dec's exaggerated reaction afterward, which some viewers found hilarious, amplified the moment visually and emotionally, proving how presenters can intentionally redirect audience interpretation by exaggerating or normalizing a scene through performance, a subtle tool often overlooked in reaction-driven discussions. Another commenter said the cast had no arguments and no drama, which contrasts the kiss moment even more because it stood out so strongly in a peaceful season, showing how unexpected gestures in a calm space feel far more intense than they would in a chaotic environment where impulsive behavior is the norm. The discussion about whether Ruby is overreacting or simply playful shows how viewers constantly evaluate power dynamics and social cues, and these evaluations shape the tone of public conversations, turning even small scenes into opportunities for broader reflections about respect, autonomy, and intention. What I also found insightful is how viewers projected their own comfort zones onto the situation, with some laughing effortlessly and others feeling uneasy, proving that reactions to spontaneity depend on personal boundaries, previous experiences, and cultural conditioning, making this one of the most psychologically rich moments of the season. Someone mentioned not finding Ruby funny at all, which highlights how strongly humor is tied to relatability rather than action, because if people don't recognize themselves in the energy of a joke, they often disconnect emotionally, and this disconnect becomes even more visible in group discussions like these. There was also a user who said they wished the show brought back When Ruby Met, which illustrates that even polarizing personalities build loyal followings that appreciate their unpredictability. showing how emotional diversity among viewers contributes to the longevity of certain cast members in the public sphere. The debate about whether the moment crossed a line raises an important question about physical comedy in modern entertainment, because viewers today expect clearer boundaries, yet still enjoy unpredictable humor, creating a tension that shows must navigate carefully to avoid misunderstandings while still entertaining. One of the most intriguing reactions came from someone imagining a very different result if gender roles were reversed, reminding us that society overlays real-world concerns onto television behavior, and this shapes emotional responses in a way that reflects broader cultural discussions about fairness and consent. The comment describing Deck as gobsmacked reflects how the authenticity of his reaction shaped public interpretation, because when a presenter known for confidence shows genuine surprise, the moment gains emotional weight, influencing viewers to take the scene more seriously than they might have otherwise. People also debated whether certain cast members looked miserable or uninterested in group interactions, and this relates to the broader theme of comfort zones, because when someone withdraws emotionally in a high-energy environment, their silence magnifies the tension or humor of surrounding events. The way viewers perceive discomfort, amusement, or confusion in that moment shows how reality television becomes a mirror for our own emotional thresholds, revealing what we find acceptable, funny, or awkward. And I believe this is one of the main reasons the scene generated so much engagement. One viewer found the kiss like a granny joke, while another treated it as an unwanted surprise, showing how generational experiences influence humor perception, making these interactions more about personal history than about the actual gesture. I also noticed comments comparing the camp's calm energy with the chaos of that brief moment, and this contrast made the scene feel more dramatic even though nothing harmful happened, demonstrating how context shapes our emotional reaction far more than content alone. There were people who defended Ruby by saying she has always been an unpredictable entertainer, and this suggests that familiarity with a person's comedic past influences how their actions are interpreted, proving that identity and history matter as much as the moment itself. One remark said Ant and Dec were annoying, which shows how audiences sometimes transfer their discomfort from a scene onto the people who host it, meaning reactions spread across all visible figures, not only those involved directly in the gesture. Someone else said that they still laugh more than any other show thanks to these wild interactions, showing that even potentially uncomfortable moments can become emotional highlights when interpreted in a charitable, humor-first way. And this diversity of interpretation keeps debates alive long after episodes end. Another fascinating comment involved a viewer feeling that certain personalities were attention seekers, which prompts a deeper reflection about how people judge extroverted behavior, especially when it disrupts a calm atmosphere, where others prefer subtlety over big gestures. There was also curiosity about why someone looked subdued in the bus afterward, which ties into the theme of emotional aftershocks. Sometimes a lively moment leaves others quiet, not because they judge it, but because they process social intensity differently. And this variation is what makes group dynamics compelling to analyze. One user joked about H needing to take his sister to Greg's, and this humorous shift shows how audiences often use comedy to diffuse tension from surprising interactions, turning discomfort into shared amusement that reinforces community bonding. Another viewer highlighted the rainbow vibes of a colorful outfit worn by one contestant, and linking it to the money earned added another interpretative layer, showing how appearance can overshadow behavior even in discussions about boundaries and spontaneity. Some felt Ruby went for it too quickly, and that speed is precisely what made the moment emotionally confusing, because spontaneity is entertaining until it crosses someone's comfort zone, and audiences instinctively react to that tension. I also found interesting the way people discussed the potential music collaborations between cast members, which suggests that even controversial or surprising moments do not overshadow long-term appreciation for certain personalities, highlighting how multidimensional viewer engagement is. Another user laughed about someone bragging about her man's bits, showing how easily discussions can shift direction in public comment threads, reinforcing the idea that humor and awkwardness often coexist within the same narrative space when audiences process unexpected moments. And what I found most telling is that even after all the debate, humor, and discomfort around that interaction, many still said this season was uplifting, reinforcing the idea that emotional safety and calm group dynamics provide a strong buffer that prevents isolated surprises from defining the entire experience. And I'd like to know whether you also felt that the moment added complexity rather than harm.